Welcome to the PharmaSource podcast.
Over the past few years, pharmaceutical supply chains have gone through a shift. What were once cost-driven transactional models are now being tested by geopolitical uncertainty, sustainability requirements, patient expectations, and increasingly complex global sourcing conditions. Many pharma leaders are asking the same questions. How do we build resilient supply chains without sacrificing quality? How do we move from vendor management to true partnerships with CDMOs? And how do sustainability and patient centricity become real operational drivers rather than just buzzwords? To explore these questions, I'm joined today by Gijs Vissers, Head of Supply Chain and Procurement and a member of the Executive Committee at Nordic Pharma. Gijs brings over 20 years of experience across supply chain, procurement and operations, having worked in fast-moving consumer goods, telecommunications and pharmaceuticals. Since joining Nordic Pharma in 2022, he has led a major transformation of the company's supply chain while building its procurement function from the ground up, all in the context of increasingly challenging global supply conditions. Gijs, thanks for joining us. To start us off, could you introduce yourself and just walk us through your career journey?
So Gijs Vissers, Dutch, 48 years old, started as a marketeer, to be honest, in the wine industry in South Africa. Then moved on working for a telephone company, then into beers, fast-moving consumer goods. I worked for Heineken, I worked for Bavaria, Heineken in the Netherlands, Bavaria and Ethiopia, Africa. And then I started working in the pharmaceutical industry for DSM and later on for Nordic Pharma, where I'm now working for 4 years.
That sounds like a funny transition from beer to pharmaceuticals. How did that happen?
Now, what you can say, if you look at all the processes, there's always a bit of fermentation in the process. Fermentation in wines, in beers, later on in medicines. But actually, what I noticed is that when I was working at the front side, more the commercial side, it was always trying to sell a good story and not being assured that also the product that you were offering was always delivered. And while I was doing my MBA studies, I noticed or I came across a program called Lean Six Sigma. And it's a kind of project management in which I became a black belt. And I noticed that many processes are set up by people that really do not look at the end result. They only look at the different steps within. And I think that when you please the end consumer or make sure the end consumer will get his products or her product, that eventually everyone will be happier. So I was doing several projects and I noticed, okay, what is the biggest asset of a company? And the biggest asset, according to me, is the employees. Not the processes, not the money, not the product, but the employees that make sure that everything is done on time and in full. And while doing that, I led some projects and I was being asked to steer some teams. And while I was doing it, I noticed that the biggest mistake is that most people in companies are not in the right position, not working on top of their qualities or their capabilities. And when you move that or you change that to a better way, you can get far better results. So I started doing that in supply chain instead of marketing. And I noticed, hey, there's a big opportunity here. Then looking at the suppliers we were working with, because I was also introduced into procurement, is that everything was money driven. Only looking for the best outcome. Where I notice if you really start working together and do it in collaboration, that potentially the end result would be far better. So I was being asked to lead several teams in supply chain procurement. And over the years, I noticed that actually what I'm doing, I'm trying to transform organizations and try to make them better from a people's perspective and from an employee perspective. And I've done that within Heineken, I've done that within Bavaria, in DSM, and now in Nordic Pharma, and all with good results, which made the people happier, first and foremost important. Secondly, it made the end result of the companies better, but I think it's also helped me to become in my strength. And this is something that I enjoy doing, and what I'm doing now for quite some years, with good fun.
In your almost 4 years at Nordic Pharma, how has the internal structure or internal organization changed?
What I still remember from the interview period I had with the former CEO, he asked me, how can it be that I always have either too many or too little products? And I had a lot of write-offs every year. And I said, okay, can you explain me your supply chain process? What do you do in forecasting and how do you measure it? And he looked at me, he said, yeah, we don't measure it at all. He said, but if you don't measure, how do you know if you are doing your things right? And he said, yeah, but this is something that I lack experience in. So I said, okay, I can help you there. Can you tell me what your on time in full? And he looked at me and I said, okay, maybe you know the abbreviation better. What is your OTC? And he looked at me, he said, over the counter. I said, no, I'm not asking over the counter products. I'm asking your on time in full in product delivery. Yeah, from manufacturing to the end patient or end customer. He said, we don't measure that. I said, why not? He said, we don't have systems. I said, but do you have spreadsheets? He said, yes. I said, if you have spreadsheets, you have data, so you can start measuring it. Now, when I got the job, I started measuring it, and I knew that all data was not 100% correct. But the first assumptions or the first indicators that I got was that our on time in full was 30%. And in the beer industry, it's around 99%. So for me, it was a big shock. So I set myself and the team some ambitions by starting, okay, I think that everyone should know the data. And we should work on forecasting. So we should ask sales, what do you think that you're selling or gonna sell? And we should look at inventory levels and bringing those all together in some simple KPIs into the process. We got data. And from data, we could analyze how the setup was and where there are certain areas where we could improve. So based on those small things, we started working on improvement. First with small steps, and later on with creating a bigger strategy on what we want to do. And actually, what I wanted to do is I want to build excellence within the organization in which data and performance measurement is quite important. So this is a journey that I started 4 years ago and we're still doing. And looking at your questions, so the good thing is the results did not only become better. Yeah, we had better sales. Yeah, we had more profits, higher revenues. But on the other hand, the relationships with the suppliers, the CMOs, improved because we provided more transparency and we acknowledged the importance of doing it together. And also, when you look at the engagement surveys that we held in the company every year, you saw that our average is above 80%. So people are quite happy. And I think that is due to the approach that I want the team to be the strongest. That does not mean that everyone fits. Over the past 4 years, we had to take some harsh decisions and we said goodbye to some people. But we always tried to help them on their next journey or their next job, which suited them better, while keeping the team in sync and making sure that we keep the results coming.
So on supply chains then, it seems to be a shift in the industry, in the conversation from cost-driven to value-driven. What do you think about that? Is that something you're sort of transitioning at Nordic Pharma?
What I find interesting, when we look at supply chains in general, our response was always quite reactive and our vision on what was happening was quite fragmented. And I think that when you start planning and really start scheduling, you know better what needs to be done. We also have seen that although if you combine procurement and supply chain, you see that contracts are there for multiple years. Well, with the recent changes that we have in geopolitics or how volatile the world is, sometimes it changes overnight. So what do we need to do? And I think instead of looking only at price and trying to optimize it, etc., I think that creating partnerships is much better. So for me, the key thing is, and the thing that we're working on for the coming years, is that we look at the supply chain from the far end and work backwards. So for whom are we doing this? Yeah? And that's the patient. So I think patient centricity should be the end goal. Then looking within the supply chain, you have different partners with whom you should work. And therefore, if you create transparency and openness and honesty and trust, I think you can achieve far better results. Then, instead of going to multiple sources to get the best price, I think that is in the resilience that we require nowadays, that is not the best solution anymore. So I believe that we need to be more transparent and open towards our partners throughout the entire supply chain and create one network, an end-to-end network, in which we work closely together. We acknowledge that we not always can do it for the best price. And sometimes we have to pay a little bit more to get better results, but that we should look at it as a whole and not as single parts. So what we are doing, we are creating partnerships with our main suppliers. And we have decided not to always have multiple sources where we get products from, but sometimes we do only a dual or a single source. And we know this is risky. But when you create a true partnership and you start all working on the same end goal, I think this is a better solution for now than trying to divert it as much as possible to get the best price.
How do you balance that consolidation, as you were saying about the single sourcing? How do you balance streamlining your supply network against those risks of single sourcing?
So one of the decisions that we have taken is that after COVID, we decided to source mainly from Europe. Mm-hmm. Why? Our CMOs, our contracting manufacturing organizations, are all based in Europe. Yeah, we have chosen to do this based on multiple facts. Yeah, one is we believe with all the aftermath after COVID is that it is better to have it closer towards or closer to where we're operating than having it in the Far East Asia or somewhere else. Secondly, from a sustainability point of view or ESG point of view, logistic wise, it's also smarter to have it closer. And then looking in general, when you look at product quality, in most cases, I'm not saying all, but in most cases, the quality in Europe is higher than in some other countries where you can potentially source for a cheaper price. So by doing that, we have decided, okay, this is what we want to do. Then looking at our CMOs, what we do, we always plan with a 20-month rolling forecast. So instead of having 12 months, we said at least 24 months we can provide you with insights, where the first 6 months are 100% covered, 100% binding. The second 6 months are 80% binding. So this gives a lot of confidence to our CMOs that they know that for the next 12 months, more than 80% is already covered and agreed for. And then looking at the agreements we have with our other suppliers and with the CMOs, they're always multiple years. And where we try to align at least twice a year through our business review meetings. We have biannual business review meetings. And secondly, we know that from an operational level, my planners, they talk to their CMOs almost on a weekly basis. And we have official supply and demand meetings every month. And by doing these kinds of things, we believe that the alignment is really, really good. And also the relationship is very close. Next to that, I try myself to visit them at least once a quarter, and see them either on their site, and I love to see the operations and see what's going on, or that we set up meetings in which we speak to each other and in which we do not always discuss only the good stories, or where we do not only discuss pricing, but where we truly, like in true relationship, we discuss everything that needs to be discussed.
So with this shift from reactive partnerships to strategic, how has that changed the way you define and measure success within a partnership?
First of all, I think we need to do it through transparency. So we're sharing all data, where in the past we kept some data for us and we did not always want to share it because that either gave away a bit of our intellectual property or it gave away a bit of what kinds of revenues we are making. But I want to have full transparency. So when we do a biannual business review meeting, we show the amount of orders that we have done. We show, of course, what we have spent over the past few years, what we're spending now, and what we're projecting for the next year. We do projects together, but we also ask them how they have been doing. And in most cases, not in all, but in most cases, they are quite transparent about their operations as well. And if they tell us that their profit is not high enough or that they have something challenges, then we always identify potential projects in which we can look at those and see what can we do together. Because I have better that they make a bit of living than none of all, and the relationship ends. And there I always try to relate it to marriages. You need to invest in a relationship. You need to invest in a marriage. And you cannot always have a honeymoon. So in order to make sure that we're always close to a honeymoon period and we remain in that in that stage, we need to invest from both sides.
Absolutely. In terms of supplier selection, CDMO selection, from your perspective, what distinguishes a true CDMO partner from a standard supplier? How can you sort of work out in those early stages who's going to be a good long-term partner on that first date?
On a first date, you always want to show the best of yourself. Yeah, and it always starts with everything is a happy day, it's beautiful. But when the story evolves or the dating evolves, then you see different sides of people. Yeah, and that is the moment when it becomes interesting. Yeah, so before we sign an agreement with the CDMO or CMO, we always do a lot of due diligence. Yeah, we look at the financial structures, we look at the histories, we look at the customers they have, etc., etc. But nowadays, we also do a climate risk assessment or a CSR risk assessment. We look at all the things that they're doing on sustainability, yeah, what they do on ethical, on social, on governance. And while we bring this all together, we do some bit of fact checking. So we confront them in when we do our RFP or tender process with the findings that we have. And based on the way that they respond, and the facts that we have, we take a decision. But the decision is never taken by only one person. And so we have multiple people involved in here from a quality perspective, from a regulatory perspective, from a supply chain perspective, procurement, financial. Uh, and then when we have done that full assessment, we have everything together, then we make a decision, is this the right partner or not? And you see there that if the involvement from multiple layers in their organization is similar to ours, and we see it's compatible, then it's potentially the decision that we would sign that marriage or that we will do the next date and go into the next dance together, and we can do.
So you mentioned transparency earlier. What is the value of sharing multi-year volume forecasts when it comes to building and sustaining those kinds of partnerships?
When you look at the pharmaceutical industry, due to all the tech transfers you need to do and all the regulatory work, it's not that easy to switch. So if you choose for one partner, when you choose for one partner, it's a choice that is made for multiple years. In order to have the best operations ready, sometimes investment is required. And then the discussion is who is the one who should invest? Is it the CDMO or is it us, the customer? And sometimes we do it jointly, and then it's a capex investment for us in order to control our purchase price or the cost of goods. But it is also showing that you want to have that long-term relation. If the CDMO or CMO decides that they do not require any investment from our side, then they want to have some guarantees on which they make their investments. And therefore, the multiple year forecast is helping them to create the internal business case to see if the investment that they are doing is worthwhile doing it. So there you see it helps.
Now let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about sustainability. Obviously, it plays a central role in your sourcing decisions. But how early does ESG come into the conversation when evaluating or onboarding new partners?
Funny enough, many years back, it came only into place after the contract was signed and we already started working together. But nowadays, we changed our approach. So we have, next to our normal code of conduct, we have a supplier code of conduct, we have our sustainable procurement principles, and we have our ESG clauses in every contractual agreement we have. So before we enter or we finalize the tender process, we always do an ESG or CSR risk assessment, in which we do a desk research based on the information we can find online or through the partner or the potential partner that they're sharing with us, and we then assess them if they are a risky supplier or not. Yeah, and we look at the environmental part, we look at the social part, and we look at the governance part, so the ESG part. How are they dealing with human rights? Is there any potential child labor activities? Do they have a whistleblower process? So all internally focused at their side to know, is this the right partner for us? Once we have done that assessment and we have assessed them as not a risk supplier for us, we want to have the ESG clauses into the agreement. So there they need to commit and officially sign off if they agree to what our clauses are. And then the next thing is that we will try to invite them to join us on our sustainability journey or our strategic ESG journey. From a company point of view, we're working on our CSRD. So, like every company in Europe is doing, we have joined or became a member of PSCI. and the Pharmaceutical Supply Chain Initiative. And we are submitting each year to EcoVadis, where last year we got a bronze accreditation, and now we're working towards platinum. And we're hoping and we're trying to investigate if the partner we're working with has the same ambitions. And once they have it and they want to improve or want to join us on the journey, one of the elements we're doing, and it's with the support of PSCI, we will invite an external auditor who can do ESG audits on their site, with the agreement that once they have done it, and first they have to do a self-assessment, and later on the actual audit takes place, the findings or the audit report is for them. And only when they agree, and we both sign off of the document, the report, then we make it public. We publish it, we make it open to each and every one. And the reason why we're doing this, because we want to continue on the journey, because we believe sustainability is a license to operate. And in a few years' time, if you do not commit to all those nice rules and regulations, potentially you cannot operate anymore. But secondly, I strongly believe in it myself, because I am here only for a short period of time, and hopefully my children and children of my children will have a planet to live on as well. And if I don't do anything, they probably have nothing or something worse than we do. So what I'm hoping is that by having those conversations, by putting those actions into place, that the companies will apply to it and will like doing it as well, and join us on the journey. And it is a journey. It is not a set of rules that we all need to comply to, because we do not know and we learn every day. And I think by making the mistakes and by learning and by trying to improve yourself, we can only do better.
Absolutely. From your perspective then, do you see any ways that pharma companies and CDMOs can collaborate more effectively to reduce environmental impact and also at the same time remaining commercially viable?
It's a huge challenge. And I think working together is the key word here, because you can't do it by yourself. And one of the reasons that we started to become a member of PSCI is that we, within the pharmaceutical industry, we're all being challenged by the many documents we need to fill in to comply to certain regulations or rules on sustainability. When you have different formats to fill, it's quite time consuming. When you can agree on an industry standard, it makes it easy. Everyone is looking into decarbonization. Scope 3 is a nightmare, because we do not have the data or the machines how to gather all the data that we need in order to see what we can improve. When you look at electricity consumption or energy consumption, it's becoming quite expensive. But when you look at our industry, manufacturing sites, they use huge amounts of electricity. So what can we do together to potentially buy the electricity altogether, or can do things that makes it cheaper or more efficient? And there are good initiatives like the Snyder Initiative, Energize, where companies can join and can collectively buy electricity. And so there are many more things. When we look at packaging, one of the challenges that we have in pharmaceutical is that in each and every medicine pack, there's a leaflet. A leaflet is only bound to 3 different languages, but everyone has a smartphone. So why aren't we using QR codes instead of a leaflet? The thing is, it's quite logical why we can't, because not everyone has a smartphone and not everyone knows how to use it. And therefore, from a protective and a regulatory point of view, we're not allowed to do so. But hopefully, over time, when we start working together, we can find ways in which we can be more sustainable in our packaging, and so can reduce the amount of packaging and become sustainable there. When we look at transportation, we're already doing it. And so a lot of transports have moved from air freight to sea freight, which is far more effective and cheaper because our sea routes are becoming better. When we together could combine truck rides, then we can be more efficient there. When we can move from gasoline trucks to electric trucks, and we can optimize there. So there are many areas where we can look into. The only challenge is where to start and where to invest. And if you do it all together, then potentially you can make a bit of a movement, which is becoming a more sustainable way of doing things.
As you say, it's a journey, not a set of rules. So I guess we're at the beginning of this journey. So hopefully we'll get to where we need to go. Let's talk about patient-centric supply chains. It's something I know you're passionate about. From an operational perspective, what does patient centricity actually mean in practice?
For me, it means that we should always have the patient in the front position, in the key position. So for whom are we doing this and what are we doing and what do they need? And what we see is that sometimes it's challenging to make sure that you can deliver the products that patients require. And that has to do with regulations, it has to do with money, it has to do with profits, it has to do with availability of starting materials, the APIs, it has to do with the scalabilities and the capabilities of manufacturing sites. So therefore, we need to really think well ahead. Yeah, we really need to look at what is happening in the world and how can we react to it. So everything is planning. But planning is easier said than done. And because you need to have the right data, you need to align and you need to see what you can do. And with some products, you need to take a bit more risk by maybe over manufacture and with the risk of obsolescence and that you have to destruct some of your goods instead of having a shortage. So what do? We always align. We look especially good at the market, what is happening everywhere. We compare it with our own figures. Yeah, we discuss it with our CDMOs to see what kind of manufacturing slots we can get and how we can make sure that everything is there on time and in full so that they can produce the products that we require. But it's also sometimes talking to the regulators or to the health agencies in different countries and to see what we can do together. So do we need to build a certain stock? How are companies protected if some products do not have enough remaining shelf life and need to be destroyed? Or what else can we do? So it's a constant conversation, but I think the biggest change is not taking profits or not taking your own capabilities in the key of things, but putting the patient in the center. That's, I think, the biggest change.
So can you share an example of how patient needs have influenced a product design or manufacturing decision?
So in one of our products, we had a challenge that the APIs were challenged by some water content, and which made us having a shortage. Mm-hmm. And what we have done there is we have, in the last years, we invested heavily in multiple sources to get the API from multiple ones. But then looking at the quality, we have seen that one of them is the biggest. So we went from one source to multiple sources back to one. And we have asked our API supplier to always have at least 2 orders on stock. And this comes at a cost. But we said this is far better than having a shortage or having a challenge. So by having those conversations, explaining to the supplier what the reasons why we need it, how essential it is, and coming to an agreement how we can prevent potential shortages or challenges in the future, we have secured a way that we always have API material. What helped us here is that in comparison to the bigger pharmaceutical companies, this supplier liked our honesty and also liked the fact that we discussed the challenges that we had and how we wanted to resolve it, and we asked for their support. And due to the thing that we had that transparency, that we were open about all the things that we were willing to do, but also the challenges that we had, and asking them what they needed, and we came to an agreement. And I think that not many organizations are that open and transparent.
Finally, then, as we look towards 2030 and beyond, what is the one key thing you believe will define a successful supply chain?
For me, it's a few elements of the things that I was saying. Yeah, we know that resilience is going to be the biggest thing. Yeah, I think therefore you always should look long term instead of short term. I think we should move away from price negotiations and price discussions only. And a shortage or not being able to be resilient, to move with the volatile world that we're operating in, with all the geopolitical challenges that we have, is probably more costly. So for me, the key words are here: think like one big end-to-end network in which every partner is important, in which the patient is always in the middle. It's always the central point of view where we need to look at. Once you start doing that and start having that open conversation, I believe that we can accomplish more. That's only one side of the equation. The other one is that everyone will be challenged with ESG regulation, with sustainability regulations. So instead of being afraid of it or trying to hide a bit or to be less responsive, I think we should try to be the first ones. And we can only do that by acknowledging that we do not know what is all required and that we are learning on a daily basis, but that we try to help each other to get the best results. And there I always use one phrase: don't invent the wheel, copy with pride. So tell others that you really like the things that they have done and ask them if you can learn from them to help to improve the entire network. And if you tell someone, when you tell someone that you really enjoy what they've been doing, you give them a compliment. How can they then refuse you not to share their experience with you? So I think if you start doing that, then we can achieve far more. And 2030 is, in one way, is just tomorrow almost, but on the other way, it's also 4 years away from us now. So there's so many things that will change, but we should make the first step and learn every day.
Absolutely. Gijs, thanks a lot for your time today. It's been great.
Thank you.